disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure more than, or rather than, lovers of God. You cannot live for pleasure and claim to be a lover of God. You know, when they interview people who are clamoring for the rights to marry, gay marriage, it is kind of bizarre because the research seems to indicate that homosexual men often have up to 3,000 or 4,000 different partners. So that doesn't seem like that it's just the relationship that a person is interested in. And the statistics are not quite as high for the women. They're a little more relationship oriented. Many of those partners among the men are 16 and under when they take these anonymous surveys, and it just can't be good for the culture. What's really going on now is there's a war. There's a war that's taking place in our culture for what's decent and right. And we're being bombarded. And in many ways, it's a war of words and terms. An example, there's a proposition now on the ballot in November. And by the way, just in case you're wondering, ministers in churches, 501c3, we're not allowed by the law to endorse candidates. We are allowed to address issues. What I'm talking about is something that should be of interest to, doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, what you are. This is an issue. And we are allowed to talk about this in the church. There's a proposition that is coming, and by the way, and I hope you go to Alan Reinach's presentation next Sabbath in the afternoon. He's going to be talking about the same subject from more of the legal side. He's got that background and experience. But this is just a very, very serious issue, friends. I started saying something, and then I distracted. Oh, it's a war of terms. So there's a proposition on the ballot. It's called Proposition 8, and it says that marriage should just be between a man and a woman. It's very simple language. But when it was presented to the state, it was presented as to protect marriage. A proposition to protect marriage. Well, some people in San Francisco legally twisted it and said, no, we're not going to let you refer to it that way. It's against gay marriage. It's not for marriage, it's against gay marriages, is the way that we insist that you market this. I mean, even the very word gay. Who invented that? Not heterosexuals. It was invented by gay people to just make it look like, well, we're just a little happier than everyone else. But the fact is, that's not true. And then the language and the terms that are being used, it's a counterfeit for marriage. There are running commercials now, and it shows somebody running to the altar. It shows a lady running to the altar trying to get married. And everyone keeps stopping the person from getting married. And then it goes on to say, how would you feel if people tried to stop you from marrying the one you love? And so they're trying to frame this in the context of, if you vote for Proposition 8, you're against love. That has nothing to do with it. You're against perversion is what it has to do. And you're for marriage. You're for what the Bible says marriage is. You're for what our founding fathers in our country has always believed marriage is. But they're using creative. I'll tell you what, friends. Now, I know something about what I'm talking about. I grew up with a mother in show business in New York City, Beverly Hills. I didn't grow up in a vacuum. I did not grow up a Christian. A lot of the composers and the actors and the writers and choreographers that my mother worked with growing up were all openly gay. And I remember having some of them say to me, Doug, it is a conflict of terms when we say we're gay, because we are the most unhappy people in the world. It's not a happy life. Or for a person to try to a duck to pretend they're a kayak, you're never going to be satisfied. It just isn't going to work. Very creative, very talented. And the advertising campaign, boy, they're going to have some of the brightest minds in the world working to defeat this proposition. You can count on that. That's why you're going to have to use self-evident common sense. So it's a war of terms. It's being framed as against marriage. You know, who was it? Abraham Lincoln. He would sometimes get into the political arena, and he was amazed at how people would twist common sense. And he loved to ask folks, he'd say, how many legs does a dog have? And they'd say, well, 4 legs. And Lincoln would say, well, let's suppose that you call the tail a leg. Then how many legs does a dog have? And they'd say, well, then 5. He said, wrong. Just because you call the tail a leg doesn't make it a leg. And that's what's happening. It doesn't matter what you call it. We all know what it is. And so it's a war of words. They're trying to change the terms. Listen to what Jesus said. Luke 16, verse 15. You are those who justify yourselves before men. This is a whole movement from a very small minority that is very vocal and outspoken. And they've basically got control of the media, in case you didn't know that. All kinds of punishment and reprisals if you should have the audacity to speak out in the media against gay. It goes a lot further than a pie in the face that Jerry Falwell got. I don't know if I have time. Matter of fact, I want to recommend a book right here in the middle of this message. Gary Gibbs wrote a book that Amazing Facts carries. I think we could probably offer to send it to anybody that is watching the program or listening. It's called Return to Sodom. Talks about a very militant, organized gay agenda in North America, and we recommend that. But it's going to be an organized war, friends, and if we don't stand for something now, we're going to fall for anything, and it will be our own fault. Now's the time to speak up. It's going to cost us. It's going to cost the culture. It's going to cost financially. For one thing, you know what's going to happen soon is we're going to be where Canada is, where you won't be even allowed to say there's something wrong with being gay up front. It'll be called a hate crime on the level of you're ranting against a certain race or a certain religion. And pretty soon we're going to get to the place where you can't even say you disagree with another religion. It'll be called a hate crime. And you're going to have the ACLU and all kinds of other people suing. Heard about 2 ladies, heterosexual ladies, that had a little more room in their apartment. They put it on an ad and said, we're looking for another woman that would like to rent some space and she will share the expenses. A lesbian applied and they said, no, we're not comfortable with that. She then sued them. She won. They were fined. They had to go to sensitivity counseling classes that were taught by lesbians and check in with the community every 3 years. Or for 3 years every year. Just because they didn't even have the right. It was called discrimination. I'll tell you, it's not getting better, friends, if we don't speak up now. Pastors are going to be sued. Couples are going to come and say, we're gay, we want to get married. And they're going to say, I don't want to do those marriages. Already there have been justices of the peace in California that have lost their jobs because they said, look, I'm not going to perform. They work for the state, and the state said, it's the law. You're out of here. And they've lost their jobs after years of faithful service because they said, I cannot conscientiously marry 2 people of the same sex. So they lost their jobs. And they'll be suing churches next. I'm telling you, friends, we need to send a very clear and decisive message to those folks that some things just don't go, that they're not right. It's also going to cost money. There's going to be all kinds of very strange litigation in these divorces. And you know, they'll be getting the same tax benefit as families. So they're really masquerading as families, though they're not. It's just 2 people of the same sex that are cohabiting together and practicing a perverted life that want the vindication of being a family, of calling it marriage, of being endorsed by our society. That's the wrong direction, friends. And we need to take a stand. I think it's bad for traditional families. Studies have shown that the optimal environment for raising children, and I realize there's some single-parent families, but I think especially those families will realize and agree. I grew up with my mom, my brother and I in a single-parent family. Back and forth between dad and mom. It wasn't ideal, friends. I'll tell you right now. The ideal is to have a mother and a father. It's not daddy and his boyfriend or mommy and her girlfriend. Is not the optimal sociological environment for children. Soon, if this law does not get overturned, and we have a chance to overturn it, we'll be forced in school to recognize this. Children will be taught that this is a normal